You're exhausted, not from the work, not from the challenges, but from the relentless performance. The constant need to prove yourself, to justify your existence, to meet expectations that shift like sand beneath your feet. You wake up each morning and immediately feel the weight of what others think you should be. Their voices echo in your mind before your own thoughts have a chance to form. You dress for their approval. You speak for their validation. You move through your days choreographed by their judgments, and somewhere along the way, you forgot who you were before you became their puppet. This isn't living. This is imprisonment with invisible chains. Every conversation becomes a chess match where you're trying to control their perception of you. Every decision gets filtered through the question, what will they think? You've become a slave to opinions that don't matter, from people who barely know themselves, let alone you. You're performing for an audience that's too busy performing for their own audience to actually see you. The irony burns. You're killing yourself to impress people who are killing themselves to impress others. The expectations never end. They multiply like cancer cells, consuming your energy, your authenticity, your peace. You meet one expectation and three more appear in its place. You excel at work, but now you're expected to excel even more. You're kind, but now you're expected to be kind to everyone, even those who drain your soul. You're helpful, but now you're expected to sacrifice your own needs for others. The goalpost keeps moving, and you keep running toward it, never realizing that the game itself is rigged. But here's what they don't tell you. Most people's judgments aren't about you at all. They're projections of their own insecurities, their own fears, their own unfulfilled dreams. When someone looks at you and finds fault, they're really looking at themselves and finding fault. When they expect you to be smaller, it's because your potential reminds them of their own untapped power. When they want you to conform, it's because your individuality threatens their safe, predictable world. You've been fighting a war that was never yours to fight. You've been answering to a jury that has no authority over your life. You've been seeking approval from people who don't even approve of themselves. The tragedy isn't that you cared too much. The tragedy is that you gave your power away to people who never deserved it in the first place. You've been trying to fill a void that can only be filled from within, seeking validation from external sources that can never truly satisfy the hunger for self-acceptance. The audience you've been performing for doesn't deserve a front row seat to your life. They don't deserve to know your struggles, your dreams, your victories. They don't deserve to influence your decisions or shape your identity. They don't deserve the energy you've been pouring into managing their perception of you. True power begins when you stop performing for an audience that doesn't matter. When you realize that their approval is not the currency of your worth. You think you need to be understood, but understanding is a luxury, not a necessity. You think you need to be accepted, but acceptance from the wrong people is more dangerous than rejection from the right ones. You think you need to prove yourself, but the only person who needs proof of your worth is you. The weight of others' expectations is not your burden to carry. It's time to set it down and walk away from the performance that's been suffocating your soul. The understanding that breaks you free is simple but profound. You were never meant to live your life according to their script. You were meant to write your own story, to define your own success, to create your own meaning. The moment you stop caring about their expectations is the moment you start living. The moment you stop performing for their approval is the moment you discover your authentic power. The weight you've been carrying isn't yours to bear. It's time to let it go. The need to be understood by everyone is nothing more than a beautiful lie that keeps you trapped in cycles of explanation and justification. You've been telling yourself that if you could just make them see who you really are, if you could just communicate your intentions clearly enough, if you could just prove your worth convincingly enough, then finally, you would be free. But that freedom never comes because you're chasing something that doesn't exist. Complete understanding is a myth, and the desperate pursuit of it is what makes you weak. You've been operating under the assumption that being misunderstood is a problem to be solved, a deficiency to be corrected. You've been exhausting yourself trying to control how others perceive you, managing their impressions like a full-time job. Every conversation becomes a public relations campaign. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to clarify, to explain, to justify. You've become a walking advertisement for yourself. And the constant promotion is killing your soul. But here's the truth that shatters everything. Most people don't want to understand you. They want to understand their version of you, the version that fits into their preconceived notions, their comfortable categories, their limited worldview. They want to reduce you to a simple narrative that makes sense to them, not discover the complex reality of who you actually are. They want you to be predictable, manageable, easily categorized. They want you to fit into their boxes, not break them. The illusion of being understood is seductive because it promises belonging, acceptance, connection. But what it actually delivers is conformity, limitation, and the slow death of your authentic self. When you need to be understood, you become dependent on others' capacity to comprehend you. When you need their approval, you become a slave to their opinions. When you need their acceptance, you become whatever they need you to be, and in the process, you lose yourself entirely. You've been making yourself small, digestible, easy to understand. You've been diluting your complexity, hiding your contradictions, smoothing out your edges. You've been turning yourself into a caricature of who you really are. Because the full version is too much for them to handle, you've been editing yourself in real time, cutting out the parts that might confuse them, emphasizing the parts that might please them. You've become a people pleaser, a chameleon, a shapeshifter who's forgotten their original form. The desperate need to be understood makes you vulnerable to manipulation. When someone claims to get you, when they mirror your thoughts back to you, when they make you feel seen and heard, you become putty in their hands. You mistake their strategic empathy for genuine connection. You confuse their calculated understanding for real intimacy. You give them access to your inner world, and they use that access to control you. But the most dangerous part of this illusion is how it makes you predictable. When you need to be understood, you become transparent. When you're transparent, you become controllable. When you're controllable, you become powerless. Your desperation to be seen makes you an open book, and open books are easy to read, easy to predict, easy to manipulate. You've been giving away your mystery, your unpredictability, your power, all for the fleeting satisfaction of being understood by people who don't matter. The truth is that being misunderstood is not a bug. It's a feature. It's not a weakness. It's a strength. It's not a problem to be solved. It's a gift to be embraced. When people misunderstand you, they reveal more about themselves than they do about you. Their projections, their assumptions, their limited perspectives. These are windows into their souls, not mirrors of your worth. Their inability to comprehend you is not your failure. It's their limitation. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You don't need to explain yourself to people who have already made up their minds. You don't need to justify your existence to those who can't see your value. The right people will understand you without explanation. The wrong people will never understand you, no matter how much you explain. And the people in between, they're not your responsibility. Here's where everything shifts. Here's where the game changes. Here's where you discover that being misjudged isn't your weakness, it's your secret weapon. What you thought was your vulnerability is actually your greatest strategic advantage. What you thought was holding you back is actually setting you free. What you thought was your problem is actually your solution. When people misjudge you, they underestimate you. When they underestimate you, they don't see you coming. When they don't see you coming, you operate with complete freedom. You move without resistance. You act without interference. You create without opposition. Their misperception becomes your invisibility cloak, allowing you to work in the shadows while they're distracted by their own assumptions. Think about it. Every time someone has written you off, dismissed you, or categorized you incorrectly, what happened? You had space. You had breathing room. You had the freedom to operate without their constant scrutiny, their endless advice, their well-meaning interference. Their low expectations became your high ceiling. Their lack of faith became your unlimited potential. Their disbelief became your secret laboratory where you could experiment, fail, learn, and grow without judgment. The strategic power of misperception is that it removes pressure. When people think you're less capable than you are, they don't burden you with their expectations. When they think you're less ambitious than you are, they don't try to compete with you. When they think you're less dangerous than you are, they don't try to stop you. They leave you alone. And being left alone is the ultimate gift for someone who's building something significant. Misperception creates a protective barrier around your true intentions. While they're focused on who they think you are, you're free to become who you actually are. While they're debating your past, you're creating your future. While they're analyzing your limitations, you're transcending them. While they're explaining why you can't, you're busy proving that you can. Their misunderstanding becomes your camouflage. You've been afraid of being misunderstood because you thought it meant being alone. But being misunderstood doesn't mean being alone. It means being free. It means being liberated from the exhausting task of managing other people's perceptions. It means being released from the prison of their expectations. It means being given the gift of operating according to your own agenda, not theirs. The most powerful people in history were consistently misjudged. They were underestimated, dismissed, written off, and ignored. And in that dismissal, they found their power. In that underestimation, they found their opportunity. In that misunderstanding, they found their freedom. They didn't waste energy trying to correct people's perceptions. They used that energy to prove them wrong through their actions. When you embrace being misjudged, you're no longer at the mercy of other people's opinions. You're no longer dependent on their understanding. You're no longer limited by their imagination. You become unpredictable, which is the most powerful position you can occupy. Unpredictability is power because it keeps everyone else off balance. While you maintain your center. Stop trying to control their narrative about you. Let them write their fiction. Let them create their version of your story. Let them live in their illusion while you live in your reality. Their misperception is not your problem to solve. It's your advantage to leverage. The less they understand you, the more power you have. The more they misjudge you, the more freedom you gain. The art of selective revelation is about understanding that information is power, and power shared carelessly is power lost. You've been living your life as an open book, displaying every chapter, every page, every sentence for anyone who cares to read. You've been confusing transparency with authenticity, disclosure with honesty, sharing with connecting. But true power lies not in revealing everything, but in choosing what to reveal, when to reveal it, and to whom. You don't owe anyone your story. You don't owe them your struggles, your triumphs, your plans, or your dreams. You don't owe them access to your inner world, your private thoughts, your deepest fears. You don't owe them explanations for your choices, justifications for your actions, or apologies for your existence. What you owe them is precisely what you choose to give them, nothing more, nothing less. The mistake you've been making is thinking that withholding information is deception. But selective revelation isn't about lying. It's about strategy. It's about understanding that different people deserve different levels of access to your truth. It's about recognizing that your full story is a privilege to know, not a right to demand. It's about realizing that mystery is not the absence of truth. It's the presence of wisdom. When you reveal everything, you become predictable. When you become predictable, you become controllable. When you become controllable, you lose your power. Your openness becomes your weakness. Your transparency becomes your vulnerability. Your honesty becomes your trap. You've been giving away your strategic advantage by laying all your cards on the table. Before the game even begins, the power of selective revelation is that it keeps people guessing. It keeps them engaged. It keeps them interested. It keeps them investing their energy in trying to figure you out while you're busy figuring out how to win. They're playing checkers while you're playing chess. They're solving puzzles while you're creating masterpieces. They're analyzing your moves while you're already 10 steps ahead. Control the narrative by controlling the information. Share your victories selectively. Discuss your plans strategically. Reveal your capabilities gradually. Let them discover your depth layer by layer, not all at once. Give them just enough to keep them curious, but not enough to satisfy their curiosity. Make them work for access to your truth. Make them earn the privilege of knowing you. The most powerful people understand that silence is not empty space to be filled with words. Silence is strategic space to be filled with intention. They know when to speak and when to remain quiet. They know when to reveal and when to conceal. They know when to be transparent and when to be opaque. They understand that the absence of information is often more powerful than the presence of information. You've been afraid of being misunderstood, so you've been over-explaining. You've been oversharing. You've been over-justifying. You've been giving them so much information that they've stopped listening. You've been speaking so much that your words have lost their power. You've been revealing so much that nothing you reveal has any impact anymore. Your transparency has become noise, and noise is easy to ignore. But when you master the art of selective revelation, your words carry weight. When you speak, people listen. When you reveal, people pay attention. When you share, people value what you've shared. Your information becomes precious because it's rare. Your truth becomes powerful because it's selective. Your story becomes compelling because it's not completely told. Let them fill in the gaps with their imagination. Let them create their own theories about who you are. Let them project their own desires onto your mystery. Let them invest their energy in trying to solve the puzzle of you. While they're busy trying to figure you out, you're busy becoming someone even more complex, even more mysterious, even more powerful. The art of selective revelation is about becoming the author of your own narrative, not the victim of other people's interpretations. It's about controlling the story they tell about you by controlling the information they have access to. It's about understanding that your full truth is not for everyone, and that's not a limitation. It's a strategic advantage. The foundation of true power is not built on external validation, but on internal conviction. You've been constructing your sense of self on the shifting sands of other people's opinions, and every storm of criticism, every wind of change, every tide of judgment has shaken your foundation. You've been living in a house of mirrors, seeing yourself only through the reflections of others, and those reflections have been distorted, incomplete, and fundamentally unreliable. Internal validation is not about self-delusion or arrogance. It's about developing an unshakable knowing of who you are, what you stand for, and what you're capable of. It's about creating your own scorecard, your own metrics of success, your own definition of worth. It's about becoming the primary authority on your own life, not a secondary character in someone else's story. You've been outsourcing your self-worth to people who don't understand your journey, your struggles, your victories. You've been letting people who haven't walked in your shoes tell you how well you're walking. You've been allowing people who haven't faced your challenges to judge your responses to those challenges. You've been giving decision-making power over your self-esteem to people who have no stake in your success. The tragedy is that you've been waiting for permission to feel good about yourself. You've been waiting for approval to pursue your dreams. You've been waiting for validation to believe in your worth. You've been waiting for others to see your value before you allow yourself to see it. But that permission will never come, because the only person who can give you permission to be yourself is you. Internal validation means knowing your own worth independent of external recognition. It means understanding your value even when others don't see it. It means believing in your capabilities even when others doubt them. It means trusting your instincts even when others question them. It means standing firm in your truth even when others try to shake you from it. This isn't about becoming isolated or disconnected from others. It's about becoming so connected to yourself that external opinions become data points, not determining factors. It's about becoming so secure in your own assessment that criticism becomes feedback, not identity-shaking trauma. It's about becoming so confident in your own judgment that praise becomes pleasant, not necessary. When you develop internal validation, you become immune to the manipulation tactics that rely on your insecurity. You can't be controlled by people who threaten to withdraw their approval, because their approval is no longer your source of power. You can't be manipulated by people who promise to validate you, because you've already validated yourself. You can't be broken by people who try to diminish you, because your sense of self doesn't depend on their opinion. The process of developing internal validation requires you to become intimately familiar with your own values, your own standards, your own definitions of success. It requires you to separate what you actually believe from what you've been taught to believe. It requires you to distinguish between your authentic desires and your conditioned responses. It requires you to excavate your true self from beneath the layers of expectation and assumption. You must become your own best friend, your own biggest supporter, your own most trusted advisor. You must learn to speak to yourself with the same kindness you would show to someone you love. You must learn to trust your own judgment with the same confidence You would trust a respected mentor. You must learn to believe in your own potential with the same certainty you would believe in a proven fact. Internal validation is not a destination. It's a practice. It's not something you achieve once and then possess forever. It's something you cultivate daily through your choices, your thoughts, your actions. It's built through keeping promises to yourself, through honoring your own boundaries, through acting in alignment with your values even when no one is watching. The strength that comes from internal validation is unassailable because it doesn't depend on external conditions. It doesn't fluctuate with the opinions of others. It doesn't diminish when you're criticized or increase when you're praised. It remains constant because it's based on truth, not perception. It's based on who you are, not who others think you are. When your foundation is internal validation, you become truly free. Free to pursue your authentic goals without needing permission. Free to express your true self without needing approval. Free to make your own choices without needing validation. Free to live your own life without needing an audience. This is where real power begins. The strength of emotional detachment is perhaps the most misunderstood concept. In the pursuit of power, people confuse detachment with disconnection, aloofness with indifference, emotional intelligence with emotional numbness. But true emotional detachment is not about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about developing the ability to observe without absorbing, to engage without being consumed, to care without being controlled. You've been living as an emotional sponge, soaking up every criticism, every judgment, every disapproving look, every harsh word. You've been carrying the emotional weight of other people's opinions as if their feelings about you were your responsibility to manage. You've been letting their emotional states dictate your emotional states. Their moods determine your moods. Their energy influence your energy. But here's what emotional detachment teaches you. Other people's emotions are not your emotions to carry. Other people's opinions are not your problems to solve. Other people's reactions are not your responsibility to manage. Other people's judgments are not your truth to accept or reject. You can observe their emotions without making them your own. You can witness their reactions without being responsible for them. This doesn't mean becoming heartless or indifferent. It means developing the emotional intelligence to distinguish between empathy and absorption. Empathy is understanding what someone else is feeling. Absorption is taking on what someone else is feeling as if it were your own. Empathy is healthy and connecting. Absorption is toxic and depleting. When you develop emotional detachment, you create space between their emotions and your emotions. You create a buffer zone where you can observe, process, and choose your response rather than simply react. You develop the ability to remain centered in your own emotional truth. Even when surrounded by emotional chaos, you become like a mountain that remains steady even when storms rage around it. The power of emotional detachment is that it makes you unpredictable and therefore uncontrollable. When people can't push your emotional buttons, they lose their power over you. When they can't trigger your reactions, they can't manipulate your responses. When they can't disturb your peace, they can't control your actions. You become emotionally sovereign, answerable only to your own emotional truth. This detachment also protects your energy. You stop wasting emotional energy on things that don't deserve it. You stop investing in reactions that don't serve you. You stop depleting yourself by carrying emotional burdens that aren't yours to carry. You become selective about what deserves your emotional investment and what doesn't. Emotional detachment allows you to love without losing yourself. You can care about people without being controlled by their opinions of you. You can invest in relationships without being dependent on their approval. You can be present for others without being consumed by their emotions. You can engage deeply while maintaining your emotional independence. The practice of emotional detachment is like developing emotional armor. Not armor that keeps you disconnected from others, but armor that protects your emotional core from unnecessary damage. It's armor that allows you to engage in emotional combat when necessary, while protecting your essential self from harm. It's armor that keeps you strong enough to be vulnerable when you choose to be. When you master emotional detachment, you become emotionally self-sufficient. You don't need others to manage your emotions for you. You don't need constant reassurance to feel secure. You don't need continuous validation to feel worthy. You don't need perpetual approval to feel confident. You become your own emotional anchor, stable and secure regardless of external emotional weather. This emotional independence is intoxicating to others because it's so rare. Most people are emotionally dependent, reactive, easily triggered, easily manipulated. When you demonstrate emotional sovereignty, you stand out. When you remain calm in chaos, you command respect. When you stay centered while others are losing their balance, you become a source of strength that others want to be around. The ultimate power of emotional detachment is that it allows you to respond from wisdom rather than react from emotion. It gives you the space to choose your battles, to pick your responses, to decide what deserves your emotional investment. It transforms you from a victim of emotional circumstances into a master of emotional choice. The concept of invisible power is the ultimate sophistication in the art of influence. While others are fighting for recognition, demanding credit, and competing for attention, you're operating from a realm they can't even see. You're wielding influence without needing to announce it. You're creating change without needing to claim it. You're building empire without needing to display it. Most people mistake visibility for power. They think that being seen equals being powerful. They think that being loud equals being influential. They think that being credited equals being important. But true power operates in the shadows, behind the scenes, in the spaces between what people can see and what they can't understand. True power is invisible power. When you operate from invisible power, you're not constrained by the expectations that come with visible power. You don't have to maintain an image. You don't have to live up to a reputation. You don't have to manage public perception. You're free to act according to your own agenda, not according to what others expect from someone in your position. Invisible power is about influence without attribution. It's about creating change without taking credit. It's about moving pieces on the board without anyone realizing you're the one playing the game. It's about solving problems without anyone knowing you're the solution. It's about building bridges without anyone seeing your architectural plans. This type of power is sustainable because it doesn't depend on external recognition. It doesn't fluctuate with public opinion. It doesn't diminish when you're not in the spotlight. It doesn't disappear when you're not the center of attention. It's constant because it's based on actual capability, not perceived capability. The strength of invisible power is that it's unassailable. People can't attack what they can't see. They can't undermine what they don't understand. They can't compete with what they don't recognize. They can't steal what they don't know exists. Your power remains intact because it remains invisible. When you operate from invisible power, you become a ghost in the machine. You're influencing outcomes without leaving fingerprints. You're shaping events without appearing in the story. You're creating results without being credited for them. You're the author of change without being the face of change. This doesn't mean you're powerless or passive. It means you're strategically powerful. You're choosing when to be visible and when to remain invisible. You're deciding when to take credit and when to let others take credit. You're controlling the narrative by controlling your presence in the narrative. The beauty of invisible power is that it multiplies. When you help others succeed without needing credit, they become invested in your success. When you solve problems without needing recognition, people become dependent on your solutions. When you create value without needing visibility, you become invaluable to the system. People will begin to sense your influence even if they can't identify it. They'll feel your presence even when you're not in the room. They'll recognize your impact even when your name isn't attached to it. They'll understand your importance even when you're not demanding attention. This is the ultimate form of power, being essential without being obvious. Invisible power also protects you from the dangers that come with visible power. You're not a target for those who want to bring powerful people down. You're not subjected to the scrutiny that comes with public recognition. You're not burdened with the expectations that come with visible leadership. You operate with all the benefits of power and none of the liabilities. When you master invisible power, you become untouchable, not because you're unreachable, but because you're unassailable, not because you're disconnected, but because you're strategically connected, not because you're powerless, but because your power is so sophisticated that it operates beyond the comprehension of those who woo. But challenge it. The liberation of authentic power is the final destination of this journey. the place where you no longer need to choose between being yourself and being powerful, because you've discovered that being yourself is the ultimate source of power. You've transcended the false choice between authenticity and effectiveness, between vulnerability and strength, between being loved and being respected. All your life, you've been told that you need to choose. You need to choose between being authentic and being successful. You need to choose between being vulnerable and being powerful. You need to choose between being yourself and being accepted. But these were false choices presented by people who didn't understand that authentic power is the only power that lasts. Authentic power is not about being soft or weak. It's about being so secure in who you are that you don't need to pretend to be anyone else. It's about being so confident in your value that you don't need to inflate it or deflate it to fit other people's expectations. It's about being so comfortable with your truth that you don't need to hide it or exaggerate it. When you embrace authentic power, you stop trying to be what you think others want you to be. You stop performing versions of yourself that you think will be more acceptable, more likable, more successful. You stop editing yourself to fit into other people's limited imagination of who you should be. You start showing up as who you actually are, not who you think you should be. This authenticity becomes magnetic because it's so rare. Most people are performing, pretending, presenting carefully curated versions of themselves. When you show up authentically, you stand out not because you're trying to be different, but because you're being real. Your authenticity creates a gravitational field that attracts the right people and repels the wrong ones. The right people are drawn to your authenticity because it gives them permission to be authentic too. Your refusal to perform gives them permission to stop performing. Your commitment to being yourself gives them courage to be themselves. Your authentic power becomes a beacon for others who are tired of pretending, tired of performing, tired of being someone they're not. And the wrong people, they're repelled by your authenticity because it threatens their performance. It exposes their pretense. It reveals their inauthenticity. It challenges their carefully constructed facades. They can't control what they can't predict, and they can't predict someone who's being authentically themselves. This natural selection process is one of the greatest gifts of authentic power. You no longer waste energy on relationships that drain you. You no longer invest in people who don't appreciate your true value. You no longer tolerate connections that require you to be someone you're not. Your life becomes populated with people who love you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. Authentic power is sustainable power because it doesn't require constant maintenance. You don't have to remember which version of yourself you presented to which person. You don't have to maintain multiple personalities for different audiences. You don't have to keep track of which lies you told to which people. You can be consistent because you're being yourself. The liberation comes from realizing that you don't need anyone's permission to be yourself. You don't need anyone's approval to live your truth. You don't need anyone's validation to pursue your authentic desires. You don't need anyone's acceptance to be who you are. The only person whose opinion matters about your life is you. When you fully embrace authentic power, you become unstoppable. Not because you're forcing your way through obstacles, but because you're aligned with your true nature. Not because you're fighting against resistance, but because you're flowing with your authentic energy. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because you're being something. This is the ultimate power. The power to be yourself in a world that's constantly trying to make you someone else. The power to stay true to your values in a world that's constantly trying to compromise them. The power to pursue your authentic dreams in a world that's constantly trying to sell you someone else's dreams. The power to live your truth in a world that's constantly trying to convince you that your truth doesn't matter. Let them misjudge you. Let them underestimate you. Let them misunderstand you. Let them project their limitations onto you. Let them write their fiction about who you are. While they're busy creating their version of your story, you're busy living the real version. While they're analyzing your past, you're creating your future. While they're explaining your limitations, you're transcending them. Your power was never in their understanding. Your strength was never in their approval. Your worth was never in their validation. Your power, your strength, your worth, it was always in you. It was always yours. It was always authentic. And now, finally, it's finally free.